members of the board. It is my pleasure to speak to you this evening regarding this topic. I am arguing the negative, that is to say that standardized testing as the status quo is efficient. The points that I really want to make all depend upon a central idea, and that is that numbers don't lie. And I want you all to keep that in mind as I set out the roadmap to how I'm going to basically try to establish this argument. The way I'm going to go and proceed and do this is I'm going to talk through the points that the government made, that is to say that standardized tests are unreliable and have lost their meaning, that they discriminate, and that there is no correlation between numbers and success. I'm then going to go ahead and return to my original point that the numbers don't lie and try to express why standardized testing is not only essential, it is actually non-discriminatory in the way that it sets out its ideals, and in that the nature of the discussion as it presently stands ignores several bias factors that I will try to establish in the second half of my speech. So to go by the points that the government, leader of the government set out, the notion that standardized testing is unreliable, the fact is that standardized tests, like many things, are a fact of life. The metrics established for the way that we are judged for performance all come down to essential measurements, whether it be a scale or a rating or something or other. People like numbers. And basically, in both a corporate and educational setting, it is important to have a standard system that all students can, or all employees, or any members of a system can basically come together and sort of be judged on the basis of that system. To kind of return to the last point that the government made, the idea of replacing standardized testing with an interview, more biases would easily be introduced into the system as it stands based on multiple factors involving the interviewer's perceptions, the interviewer's mood, all the same statistical deviances that occur in the way that a person's ability to take a standardized test can affect their ultimate score, fall into the judgment of the person who's interviewing them. And that's really key, and that's going to revisit itself throughout the course of the other arguments I'm going to make. In regards to the point that they are unreliable, the fact is, as I said, numbers do not lie. These machines are optically, typically, the SATs was the one that we were talking about, are typically optically scored. There's a very, very low number of errors made. The only errors that can be made are mostly related to student errors, errant marks. The ability to fill in 1 out of 5 circles is a fairly simple concept. Proving one's self-worth in both the job market and educational market, the ability of, yes?
Anyway, sorry. So if someone happens to guess every single question right on the SAT, are they smarter than someone who gets most of the questions right by actually knowing stuff?
It's not so much the notion of the score as a measure of what they got correct. It's their ability to complete it and get a reasonable score. If you were to fill in every letter on the SAT and guess, if we're going by educated guess, if we're going to qualify that, you're still thinking through the question. If we're going to qualify that as guess, as in I put A for every answer, the designers of the SAT, if that's the one we're going to stay on, the College Board have specifically designed it that you will not score above a median if that were to happen. And also, to sort of bolster the background that's been put into these tests are designed by individuals who understand the statistical deviances of large-scale testing. The fact remains that colleges, while the government points out that colleges are trying to step away from these tests, and he made that point in number 2 when he said they've lost their meaning. The fact is that one of the newest and most prestigious technical colleges in the country, the Franklin W. Olin School of Engineering, exclusively issues invitations to students based on their SAT scores. The students at this school are so exceptional in their ability to process information that they don't end up in management, they end up in research, and they do groundbreaking things. So the idea that the SAT scores don't correlate with job success is sort of made moot by both that factor and the factor that in regards to point number 3 and point number 2 about SAT correlation and the loss of meaning, the government likes to point out that the schools are stepping away from SATs as a means to judge. I think that's undermined by the point that Lehigh is a more prestigious university. I think that we can make that remark based on other schools, say a state school. The fact that Lehigh's SATs are generally higher than a state school means that Lehigh is taking more top-tier students. The curriculum at the college itself is non-tangential to the ability of the students to actually enter the college, and that's important to consider. And that also returns to the notion of established metrics. The fact remains that employers if they don't have some sort of standard way of judging their employees, they have no fair way of assessing the performance that their employees have done, and the same applies to schooling. On the basis of discrimination, the fact remains that tests like the No Child Left Behind, which is, I believe, the most prevalent standardized test in the country, while flawed on several levels not related to this argument, does offer insight into the ability of scores to correlate with the success of those students. When students do very poor because they can't afford preparatory information, it shows. That's actually bolstered by the fact that the government makes the point that students can prepare for these tests. Students who can prepare for these tests and who can sort of practice problems, get a feel for how to take the test, and train to take the test are likely going to succeed more in life anyway. They will have the opportunity to enter more prestigious districts, more prestigious colleges, and they will have the opportunity to ultimately improve themselves a bit more in the corporate world. And that transcends classist income issues insofar as that while their scores may correlate to lower scores in a district showing need for improvement, the upper end of that is that there are often cases, it cannot be blanket stated that all students in poor districts do poorly on the SATs. There are some very bright people who are able to score well, and opportunities already offered for class correction, things such as affirmative action that fall into place, already offer more than enough opportunities to correct for social inadequacies in class as extended to this, while that prevalence is rather small. Finally, to really talk about the last point that the government made regarding SAT testing and replacing it with an interview, as the fact remains, as I stated earlier, all the factors that fall into a student's ability to fail a standardized test or to score poorly on a standardized test are doubled with the addition of a second person, a second factor. The interviewer there is no way for an interviewer to not hold a bias. The notion that the government made the point that private firms like Goldman Sachs and other firms look at SAT scores and interview shows two things. One, that they put value on these tests and do see a correlation with their employees' success, and two, that personal interview vets out candidates that look and feel and seem like the type of candidates that would be appropriate for that group. There's a bias in the ability that the interviewing process selects employees who fit a position. If we're introducing that bias into something that's supposed to give an opportunity for people to prove a general aptitude of any kind, that sort of undermines that whole notion that an interview will be an unbiased estimator, as it were. And finally, I'm just going to reiterate the point that the numbers don't lie. These tests have very few external factors aside from student non-preparation that would really fall into why students would fail, and it is for that and more reasons that the opposition maintains that standardized testing should remain. Thank you.